Mishmash! Kitbash Corner!
Hey, today we're finally doing the first Ork Kitbash on the channel. Kind of insane to say that out loud, though this isn't the first Ork video on the channel, though I guess the Tin Boy isn't technically an Ork. Screw it, that's the first Ork video on the channel. But in today's episode, I plan on taking the Tankbusta's Kill Team box, and I'm going to be adding new members to it utilizing old Ork Boy bodies. One thing I both like and dislike about new Kill Team boxes is you end up with a bunch of bits that you can't put on any of the existing figures because they only give you so many. Though it is a little bit annoying, it also means I get to make some extra content out of it, so whatever. Additionally, I'll toss in a short tutorial on how I made the urban bases for these guys, and I'll show you how I paint Ork flesh, or at least a slight little dip into how I paint Ork flesh. But before we get into all that orky goodness, like always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get to see my videos early, and for $5, you get access to a weekly Q&A stream, in which I'll showcase your minis. You also get exclusive roles and channels within the Mishmash Discord, and above everything, it just really helps me out. Just want to say a huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are amazing. And if you're interested in anything Wargames Atlantic related or Galleri related, you can use my affiliate links in the description and use my codes. Mishmash 5% for Wargames, and Mishmash for Galleri. But with all the promotional stuff out of the way, let's get tucked in, hold your squigs, and let's kitbash the best damn faction in 40k. They really made the boxes that much more expensive for an over-glorified fidget toy. I don't care if it's useful in the game. Anyway, no spurging. To reiterate what I said earlier, I'm going to be adding on to this box, as I already really like the contents within. I'm not super huge on the new Ork Boy models that they've had in the last few years, but I quite like how these guys look. But let's be real, I feel like 6 orcs is not nearly enough for all the options they give you in this box. Yes, it does come with 2 bomb squigs, but at least a couple other Ork Boys would have been nice. But without completely recapping the entire intro, I think what I'm going to do is actually just show you where I started from. To make these new orcs, I found a bunch of old Ork Boys from my original Start Collecting box around the time I got into the hobby. These poor little orcs have been through hell and back, and have been stripped multiple times. To get us started, I have a bunch of old Ork Boys that are completely covered in old paint, and I had to pull apart all their arms and heads. This one in particular had a really slumped pose, and I don't know how I managed to get him to do that, but I decided it would be perfect for the bomber lance, or whatever you want to call this thing, the rocket launchers, to attach to his back, essentially acting as a living mortar. Once I was happy with how it placed, and it placed rather well on the back, I would begin adding a little bit of Tamiya to the little exhaust port on the back, and I would begin bending the little cables that would feed into it, as they don't really fit the body type. But thankfully, it's pretty malleable plastic, although, honestly, using some real-life wires probably would have worked better. I still like how it looks. Thankfully, once I began bending it and gluing it in place, it fit rather seamlessly. And even though it does look kinda jank, these are orcs, so we can kinda get away with that. God, I miss kitbashing orcs. I can do stupid things, and it still works. Now, once the little button was set in place, I then decided to glue on one of the older heads, and I realized that this figure just had another head pulled off of him. I don't remember what I was doing, but I don't know. I feel like I'm solving a crime scene with these models. But I had to use a little bit of sprue glue to actually mend the neck with the new head, as there was just a nasty scrape on the neck itself. Thankfully, with a little bit of time, this actually worked out really well. It settled nicely into the original musculature of the orc, and it just made everything meld together. For his armaments, I didn't really know what to use, so I found some old Ork Commando bits, and you can actually blame this set for why I haven't done Ork Boys in a long time. Roughly right before I started the channel, I went on kind of an orc binge, and I kind of got sick of painting them. I really went into depth with painting those, and I guess I just got kind of burned out of orcs. The other arm was a little rocket arm, however, I did end up changing this to another orc blade later on. I wanted to use that arm for one of the other guys in the set, so I ended up ripping it off and just giving him another blade. As you can see, I'm being kind of weird with the footage here. This is literally me just trying to find a way that I could let him settle. But once he was glued together, I was quite happy with how he turned out. Admittedly, this is where I say that a lot of the models in this video are not fully painted. I didn't really have a lot of time to finish this video because I had to throw it together rather fast because another project I was working on had a catastrophe. So, yeah, but I don't know. I think he still looks pretty cool. And we can move on to the next boy. Now this one is a little bit more simplistic and a lot less character-driven, as I just wanted to make a bunch of rocket boys. Thankfully, however, the rocket arms are pretty form-fitting to the regular orc boys. Although there are definitely gaps, this is easily fixed using a little bit of sprue goo. As you can see here, I ended up just basically taking a little bit of the thick Tamiya and mixing it in with the sprue goo to create a pretty seamless fit. It definitely takes a couple of layers to finally get to a full form, but that's okay. I'm not looking for a perfect seal, and at the end of the day I am attaching some of the pauldrons from the kit itself, and this kind of masks off some of the areas, so we don't really need to go into super great detail to completely fit together the arms. I think this is just kind of a testament to how well the new bits work with the old orc boy bodies. And the head is actually from the new kit as well, but I couldn't quite tell much of a difference. It's also why I think the old orc boy kit is kind of timeless, and I think GW even realizes that because you can still buy that one alongside the new orc boys. Which I don't mind as much, but, you know, 4 choppas and 4 shoota boys to a box is kind of stupid. But at least they're giving you the option to get both kits. So I guess mixing them together could be kind of fun. As you can see, I did make quite a few of these orc boys utilizing the same basic parts, and they just look really good. This orc boy was clearly a Burna boy because he has the Judge Dredd helmet. I do kind of want to find my old Burna boys, that could be fun for kitbashing. But if you can't tell, it's basically the same principle. Yeah, it might not be a perfect fit, but a little bit of sprue goo goes a long way. And I will say it is nice to have these arms, because if there's one thing I don't really care for in the old Orc Boys box, is the arms are a little dated. But that's pretty much the only thing I can really complain about with that box. Also, I hope I don't piss you off too much with having just completely painted models and kitbashing onto them. But if I do, please let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate that. I do read all of them. This guy liked how I kitbashed, however, because the pauldrons were basically symmetrical. What's crazy is I actually ran out of orc boys with how many bits I could actually attach to the regular ones to create more rocket boys. Just goes to show you could have added a couple more orcs and I would have been happy. Now the next rocket boy is technically a knob, which part of me kind of wishes I made into one of the melee boys, but I ended up building a ton of them with the base kit, so I decided to make him a rocket boy. But again, I think one of the better parts about the knobs is they actually fit the overall armor way better than the regular orc boys, though I do admittedly really like the clanginess of having a huge piece of metal on their back. It does look very ragtag and thrown together. But this guy feels a little bit more proportional in some aspects. Though, again, I do like that they all look different from one another. Makes orcs more fun to paint. I mean, let's be real, my name is Mishmash. Do you think I like uniformity? I will say, however, the rocket arms did not fit the knob nearly as well, which makes sense, they have a much broader torso. And again, yes, sprue goo was an MVP, but I ended up utilizing some more weird methods of kind of carpeting over the ugly gaps. But we'll get to that momentarily. In the meantime, I ended up sealing everything, and I ended up adding the bandolier of grenades and rockets to his back. And this didn't look as good, as it was kind of hard to really make this fit onto the body. But again, maybe I'm using the excuse of them being orcs a little too liberally, but whatever. I think it looks fine just dangling freely. Plus, I could totally see him just ripping off the bandolier and whipping him at people like old Black Cat firecrackers. But I'm sure you're noticing at this point his right arm is kind of sloped. To mitigate this, I decided to use the jaw of a regular squig from Age of Sigmar. I just decided to give him a little bit of armor, and I felt that was kind of fitting. It does kind of make him look more like a beast snagga, but it's literally 1 bit, so I don't know if I can really go full force with that. Plus, I plan on painting these guys as goths anyway. Getting it to fit in the pauldron was pretty easy, however. It had the perfect amount of space, and I did kind of end up sprue gooing it all the way to hell. It does look a little bit welded in, so again, I don't really know how I'm going to paint it, but I'm kind of excited to. I'll just see where the painting takes me. And I'm really happy with how he turned out especially. But again, this is where I mention, these guys are not finished. Keep in mind, I did build these guys a month ago. I didn't think to take pictures of them while they were primed, and I'm still very slowly chipping away at them. But I do have a good scheme cooking on them, and eventually I will get them done. Hell, I painted them on stream a couple times. Check them out. But now for the final orc boy, I decided to utilize one of the over-the-shoulder rocket launchers, which I honestly prefer. I really like how these look. However, this was a little bit more difficult to glue on, as I did end up having to kind of balance him on the floor. But once I allowed a little bit of time for it to glue fully, it looked amazing. And after that, I finally utilized this rocket arm from earlier. Adding a little bit of sprue goo, and already it's starting to look pretty good. Personally, this one is probably my favorite of the bunch because he just looks so undeniably orky. It's very simplistic, but there's something about him that just catches my eye. I know I kind of rambled about it earlier, but I do find it really cool that a kit that came out in 2005 meshing together with one that came out a year ago is kind of amazing. Because, honestly, with this painted, I don't think you could really tell the difference. Sure, some things are a little bit more crisp in some areas, but overall, I don't really see much of a difference, and I really appreciate that. Only key difference I don't like about the newer orcs is that their faces are really small. Next little bit I wanted to add to this guy is one of the motorized backpacks from the Gene Cult Acolytes kit. I really like mixing and matching these kits especially because you can really get some interesting weapons out of them. Had I not utilized the bits for my DRG dwarves, I think it would have been really interesting to make some rock grinder weapons for these guys. Again, it's a very simplistic model, but that's what I really enjoy about making these guys. But now that I've kind of built everything up, and once I add the blast shield he's completely done, I do want to go into a little bit of detail on how I made the bases for these guys. Recently, a friend of mine made some interesting bases for their orcs, and I wanted to replicate this in my own little way. Utilizing pieces of the actual box, I'd begin slicing down little squares, and I would make them into smaller tiles. It's kind of up to you how you slice these. Sometimes people like to do brick patterns, and I do think that looks kind of interesting sometimes. And sometimes I'll slice my own to kind of create jagged patterns and destroyed tiles, but personally I think the classic checker pattern is very befitting for 40k. And you don't need to be super duper neat with these because the combat zone these guys are going to be trudging through is going to be treacherous anyway. Usually what I end up doing is spacing out the tiles as you would, well, regular tiles. But if there's overhang, I just simply snip away and slice into the cardboard as it's thick enough to create a pretty realistic surface. Basically just chipping away at the overall ceramic. Over time too, if you want to trim them to look more like tiles or perhaps panels like Necromunda bases, it's pretty simplistic. For the bases too, you can utilize round sprues and make them into sewer drains. Usually I end up giving each tile a good amount of space as I do want to create some more dynamic areas for each of the orcs. And I do end up utilizing some very thin cork for larger pieces of debris. The thing I like about these bases is, though it does seem like a lot of materials, they end up working together really well, and they can pretty much be applied to anything you want. If it's not obvious, I end up using these bases a lot for my other models. Once everything is settled in too, after utilizing the superglue, you can then begin to add in a bunch of PVA and really kind of settle this into the cracks and crevices between the tiles. This gives a very realistic look overall, though I wouldn't add a ton in between the tiles. Just a little bit gives a little bit more for the sand to grip onto. The sand I end up using is usually very, very low grit too. But once I'm happy with the amount of glue I have on the base, I can just dunk it into my sand and voila, very, very simplistic battleground bases. It's a lot of different texture and you don't really need to do much for them to stand out. Really, if you just want to prime them with black and maybe just dry brush over, there's tons of different areas you can go over using contrasts. I typically just end up using a zenithal prime anyway, so usually I end up painting the grits and little areas using some darker colors, and the tiles you can just go hog wild with. Black and white usually works, but kinda just depends on how you like to do it. If you're going more for the Necromunda base look, I wouldn't add the sand in, but I think the metal debris that the orcs are standing on in the base kit just works well for an urban base. But as one final little thing for the video, I did end up painting the flesh of one of the orcs, and I do want to showcase this, as this is kind of the first time I've gotten to do that on the channel. Kind of an all over the place video, but we're getting immersed, it's orky. Now after a Zenithal Prime, the way that I like to paint some of the skin is different every time, but for this guy I decided to go for a much more dull tone. The paint I'll be using to base coat the skin is Camo Green from Puracryl. This color flows extremely well, and it's really perfect for what I'm going for here. Though I do prefer very vibrant green orcs, though honestly I like painting them in all sorts of different greens. I think this is probably my favorite universal green. And this is where things get fun. While the paint is still slightly wet, I would actually mix together a little bit of the camo green 1 to 3 with some yellow green. Using these two colors, we can layer over the raised surfaces of the flesh, and will bring up just a little bit more vibrancy. Thankfully, orcs are carved out of granite, so the raised surfaces are pretty obvious on these guys. If you struggle with brush control, just give yourself a little extra time and make sure to brace, but I'm going to tell you now this is a great starting point in learning to layer and overall do some freehand. In some ways, I would say orcs are actually more beginner-friendly than Space Marines. There's enough complexity that if you want to go outside of your comfort zone, you got plenty of places to fly, but if you just want to go full-fledged dirty and go over the top of the scrappiness, you have basically the perfect army for it. As you can see with the way I'm layering over the raised surfaces, I'm not just simply layering over, I'm creating a little bit of sketchiness to really create a bit of overall art style and a little bit more of a cartoony look. I kind of go about this similarly to how Ninja Turtles are typically drawn. Kinda out there, but makes sense, doesn't it? Thankfully, orcs have very defined musculature, especially on the face and the arms, so it's pretty nice to start this as a freehanding method, and with blending. Now, over the more raised surfaces, I'm going to be focusing pure yellow-green to really bring up the vibrancy. As you can see already, we're really getting into that nice orky green. This is quite satisfying to apply, especially when you start seeing it drying in and really taking form. And I think the sketchiness of applying this, especially on the rough surfaces of the neck, it's a really good practice for the freehand again, but I think this especially makes it stand out. It not only looks realistic, but it still has that cartoony charm that's kind of perfect for orcs. Now for kind of a weird method. At this point, I decided to paint in the lips, and to do so, we're mixing in a little bit of pink using a little bit of yellow-green on top of it. Right now, it's kind of a nasty color. It looks really weird and kind of yucky, but over time, we'll be adding in some hot pink to create the really vibrant colors on the lips. We can then just paint each individual lip curl, and after doing so, we'll be going back into the skin, and I'll be utilizing a little bit of yellow-green mixed with some khaki to create freckles. This is over the top, and part of this is I just kind of like doing it because I'm so used to painting core, but once this starts drying, it looks really subtle and it doesn't look nearly as vibrant, so it looks quite realistic. You don't need to do this, of course. I don't have to make you paint your orcs exactly how I paint them, but I can tell you it's pretty satisfying once it dries. It's just a little detail that might not be necessary, and now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm kind of realizing why so many of the orcs are unpainted. I'm a dum-dum, what can I say? But now to really create in some very immersive and silly ways to paint in orc flesh, I'm going to be mixing together some vibrant green with a little bit of pink to create some stubble. Oddly enough, when you mix these two colors together, you get the perfect mixture for a green stubbly face. You do have to be patient with this and go about it in very thin layers, kind of similarly to how you paint the scalps of Space Marines, but overall, I can tell you honestly, it's just a small detail that makes it stand out all the more. Maybe even more so than the freckles in my opinion anyway. I think both of them combined though, you can really make your orcs stand out. But again, I will not sugarcoat it. If you're trying to build an army, and you're trying to build models fast for a video, maybe you can skimp out on that, but I don't know, whatever. I still got it painted, and honestly, if you like how I painted the skin, and you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, I might end up doing a full-fledged video on how to paint orc skin. What a befittingly directionless video. Despite this being a video that I had to do literally last second because of a catastrophe, I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out. And if you enjoyed it, thank you. That means a lot, actually. And all in all, I'm just happy to do more orcs on the channel. I definitely plan on mixing them in more often. But I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video. If you enjoyed this video or found anything at all helpful, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.